Heyo, Valus here. You ever wonder why every EA game nowadays uses the Frostbite engine, and why every EA game nowadays kind of sucks? Well, buckle up and enjoy.
In 2005, an up-and-coming game developer by the name of DICE released a game near and dear to my heart, a first-person shooter by the name of Battlefield 2, published by everyone's favorite company. Battlefield 2 built upon 1942 in Vietnam in basically every aspect. It featured a modern setting and weapons, with a focus on strategy while weaving in tactical shooter elements. The multiplayer mode introduced squad-based gameplay, which promoted teamwork and made you feel like everyone was in it all together, experiencing the same challenges and perils of the battlefield. But the main attraction here was the Refractor 2 game engine. This included improved physics and dynamic lighting, and allowed the developers to strive for more realism in the game as compared to its predecessor. And listen, I'm not going to pretend like I know shit about game development, but that's what I read online, and that's what I remember thinking to myself at the time. And even though my computer could barely run the damn thing, I was just blown away by the fact that I could run around, find a helicopter, fly it around. I mean, at the time, this stuff was mind-blowing. And don't just take my opinion for it. The sales numbers mirrored the overall critical and public reception as well, selling over 1 million copies in its first month after release, and reaching over 2 million by July of the following year. But this isn't a video on Battlefield 2. That's for another time. Where this story begins is with the 2008 release of Battlefield Bad Company and the debut of DICE's shiny new toy, the studio-developed revolutionary Frostbite engine. Continuing on from the evolution seen in the Refractor engine between 1942 and Battlefield 2, Battlefield Bad Company and the Frostbite engine, the name of the game here was destruction. Not only that DICE was trying to destroy the competition, but that you could literally destroy anything in the game that made sense. Not sure if there's enemies in that building you're approaching? No problem. Take out your rocket launcher and blow that baby to smithereens. Force your enemies to expose their location. This level of freedom really allowed you to tackle situations in the way that you personally saw fit. With this, DICE was showing the industry that they were not only providing something different and unique from its competitors, but that the company was also working towards pushing the medium and the industry forward. You see, whereas other developers within this particular genre of FPS were content to sticking with the status quo and chasing to be the next Call of Duty, DICE was not only interested in differentiating their product, but also in creating something unique and different from the industry altogether. And it was this passion for the medium that personally made me respect DICE and EA even more at the time. And don't get me wrong, Infinity Ward and their wildly successful Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was right up there at the time in my book. They were pushing the boundaries of online multiplayer and redefining pacing, progression system, but with Battlefield, the action just felt different, less arcadey, a little bit more grounded in, dare I say, realism. After the success of Modern Warfare, the following year Activision releases Call of Duty World at War, a great game in my opinion, built on the foundations of Modern Warfare while bringing the series back to World War II, and introducing the world of Nazi zombies, which, let's be honest, that's probably the best thing that ever came out of this game. But that's all it really did. With the exception of new modes, it just built upon what was already there, what already came before it. And that trend would continue for that franchise, albeit successfully, as it is a solid business model and clearly has served Activision very well. I'm assuming EA took notice of this as they essentially did the same thing with Battlefield 1943, proving that they could take the easy way out, and most likely due to the combination of increased sales and lower production costs, make a little bit more money in the process. But they chose not to continue this strategy, but instead to push forward once more. Oh wow, how times have changed. Battlefield Bad Company 2 comes out in 2010 and blows everyone's socks off. Seriously, I can go on for hours about this game, but luckily there's a shit ton of people on YouTube that already share that sentiment, and they already made their own videos, so I'll put those links in the description below and you can check them out for yourself. But if you don't already know, this game is held in extremely high regard by a good amount of the Battlefield community, with critics praising its near photorealistic graphics, sprawling, densely populated environments, and even Eurogamer's Dan Whitehead at the time stating that with the release of Bad Company 2, EA's Battlefield is an open challenge to Activision's market leadership with Modern Warfare 2, in that Battlefield Bad Company 2 is a way superior game. Listen, I was a Kimbo shotgun running Afghan as much as the next guy, but the formula was growing old, and Battlefield was once again piquing my interest, and that interest was solidified with the release of Battlefield 3 and the reveal of the Frostbite 2 game engine. The sequel to Battlefield 2 and the original Frostbite engine featured powerful upgrades such as deferred rendering and real-time radiosity. And in full transparency, I don't know what any of this shit means, but god damn it looked intense. It also built upon the destructibility with Destruction 3.0, and this was more than just marketing jargon, because in this game, explosions looked like a spectacle. And you see, up until this point, the story seemed pretty straightforward. DICE creates a game engine, employs it into a new Battlefield game, releases the game, and based on the feedback, goes back to the drawing board, addresses any issues or limitations, deploys it into the new Battlefield game, so on and so forth.
And it's here where I believe that EA's true intentions were revealed.
When it was announced in 2011 that the upcoming Need for Speed The Run, another title published by EA but developed by a different studio, EA Black Box, would be implementing the Frostbite 2 game engine into their game as well, marking this the first time that Frostbite was framed as a tool for EA and not just for DICE and Battlefield. One consequence of this decision was that it took EA Black Box a full year to repurpose the game for a third-person, fast-paced driving simulator and not a first-person tactical shooting simulator. I'd like to imagine that the team was given a sales pitch of all the great things this new strategy could allow for them to do, but they failed to mention that their team would be the ones responsible for figuring out how any of it worked. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, these large companies are publicly owned businesses with shareholders to keep happy. Their number one motivation is profit. But with that all out of the way, a few years go by, and with the sprawling success of The Run, EA decides to double down and put Frostbite 2 into more of their titles coming out that year. Medal of Honor, Warfighter, and Army of Two, The Devil's Cartel. And although the first Army of Two game was praised by critics for its cooperative play, you already knocked it out of the park the first time. I mean, how can this success lead to future failure? Well, unfortunately, that's going to be a common thread through the remainder of this video.
Okay, so the first few Frostbite Everywhere games kind of sucked, right? But we can get past that. We can chalk it up to learning curves, you know? Hey, this is a long-term investment. Not gonna happen overnight.
But now a lot is resting on the future and the next iteration of the engine. And you'd think at this point you'd have all hands on deck, all teams working together to develop the new version with this new strategy at the forefront. I don't know what happened, but that's not what happened.
I don't know what the that was.
First kick to the groin comes with the release of Battlefield 4 on October 29, 2013. First Battlefield game on a new generation of consoles and the first to utilize the brand new Frostbite 3 engine. And for all intents and purposes, based on the information we had at the time, it seemed like everything was coming together smoothly, and the hype was epic. It was the first time I can remember being more excited about a new Battlefield game than a new Call of Duty game. And it was also the first time I can remember being sincerely let down by one of my favorite franchises of all time. Nowadays, you might look at the Steam review of 9 out of 10 and say to yourself, Valus, you're an idiot. You don't know shit about what you're talking about. But that's alright. You probably weren't there at the time. So allow me to show you. And it was shortly after Battlefield 4's release that EA publicly announced that they would be encouraging their development companies to utilize Frostbite of their game engine of choice, as seen in this Engadget article from November 2013, which quite frankly has aged like fine milk. Soon after Battlefield 4's debut, EA announced that it was moving away from a fragmented development system and would use Frostbite, the publisher's proprietary game engine, instead. The move could benefit the financially beleaguered publisher. Gamers, however, stand to reap the biggest rewards with the promise of the highest quality games for their new consoles. Even though the engines they had worked for the games that they were creating, and EA made it clear that their ambition was not to force their development teams to use the engine, and instead they would be compelled to switch. So, how did this approach play out across the studios? Well, let's begin with BioWare. Starting with Dragon Age Inquisition, right out of the box when switching over to Frostbite from their previously bespoke engine, BioWare had to start with the creation of a dialogue system for its characters. Following this, they then needed to figure out how to animate animals within the engine, and it didn't end there. Frostbite doesn't really understand the idea of stats or items or saving a game, conversations, cutscenes. Implementing these basic features also took a really long time. I had to get the conversation in-game, open my tools at the same time, and then as soon as I hit the line, I had to hit the pause button really quickly. But in the end, through these growing pains, BioWare and DICE were able to come together and through that BioWare magic, release one of the most successful titles. However, the same didn't ring true when it came to Mass Effect Andromeda, as the team working on this title strived for something even grander. They weren't aiming for open world, no. They were going for full-scale planetary travel, a much larger expanse in Inquisition spaces, but also something Frostbite just wasn't equipped to handle. Whenever you're trying to do something that fits the engine vehicles, for example, Frostbite handles that extremely well, but when you're building something that the engine's not made for, oh, that's where this becomes difficult, one developer told Kotaku. There are many discussions about what Mass Effect Andromeda could have been. The team wasn't held back by the Frostbite everywhere mantra. If they were able to license a different third-party engine, or even create a bespoke engine for the intricacies of their grand design. This is stated rather bluntly by an ex-developer who worked on the project on Twitter. Frostbite is easily the worst, shittiest, most pain-in-the-ass engine I've ever used in my career, and I shipped Wolfenstein off the Doom 3 tech. The exact same game design in Unreal vs. Frostbite will take dozens more engineers, money, and time on Frostbite because of the way it's architected and how far behind it is from Unreal Engine, unless you're making a Battlefield game. Taking all of that into account, it's apparent that the game is built around the engine, and in my opinion, it should be the other way around, with the tech being built to support the vision of the game. But that costs more money, so fuck it.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
Throughout the better part of the 8th generation of consoles, EA Sports was using their in-house Ignite engine to power all their different properties, but that went against the company's push to integrate Frostbite across all their studios, and this was to change with the release of Madden 18. So what did Frostbite bring to the sports simulation, you may ask? Oh, awesome. Well, it brought a half-assed cinematic campaign where you barely have any input into the progression of your character because everything's pretty much strung along for you. Remember how in the older Madden games there was a franchise mode and mini-games where you could practice drills and manipulate all facets of your team, players, jerseys, stadiums? Nope, that's all gone, but the game looks pretty, right? One of the most glaring issues in the Frostbite Madden games is its over-reliance on animations and a complete lack of a competent physics engine. After players called this out, EA Sports tried to rectify these issues with, you guessed it, even more animations to try and make the new games feel more like the older games.
But like, why is this even a thing?
To reiterate, in the company's push to synergize their output, what they have done is unintentionally force their developers to now create their games around Frostbite's offering. So if Frostbite doesn't have a key feature, well, the solution is inherently constrained to the capabilities within Frostbite itself.
Innovation.
And every Madden since then has essentially been a reskin of Madden 19. Could it be that the developers have hit a wall with Frostbite? This is just as good as it gets? Which all brings us to the final nail in the coffin, Anthem. Anthem was to be BioWare's coup de grace to the competition, a massively multiplayer, full-blown looter shooter from the team that brought you Bioshock and Dragon Age. Everything that was happening up until this point was all supposed to lead to this moment, but the same problems continued to plague Anthem. While the team was experimenting and developing what the game could actually be, every time that there was an idea or there's something that they wanted to tweak, something that the team thought would be cool, they couldn't just do that. They had to first see if Frostbite could even support it, and spoiler alert, most of the time, that wasn't the case. For starters, Anthem was fully online. Dragon Age and Mass Effect weren't. It's hard enough to make a game, one former BioWare employee told Kotaku. It's really hard to make a game where you have to fight your own toolset all the time. And similar to the story of EA Black Box and Need for Speed The Run, most of the development time that would have been spent on making the game, fun, would instead be spent on trying to get major features of the game to even run on Frostbite. Major features that would eventually be cut. Given the fact that some developers claim getting some of the ideas working in Frostbite required as much work as making a new engine altogether, you start to wonder how much money was really saved by not paying for these third-party licensing fees or any additional R&D. In EA's mind, this was to be the game that proved the Frostbite Everywhere mantra was a success, that development teams would be able to build upon the prior versions and modifications of Frostbite and leverage that to their advantage.
Innovation.
So, where do we go from here? Well, if Battlefield 2042 is any indication, I'd say we have a long ways to go until we get back to any semblance of the glory days.